My name is Emily. I'm 31 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. I own a small company specializing in designing living spaces ranging from apartments and townhouses to small cafes that clients want to turn into places that evoke emotions. I'm not wealthy, but I earn enough to support myself, take care of my husband, and provide for my daughter, Ava, 8 years old, the light of my life. My family doesn't come from an upper-class background, but my parents, Stephen and Claudia, have always wanted people to think otherwise. I was born and raised in a family where appearances were everything. My father ran a well-known furniture store in town, while my mother always carried expensive handbags and spoke in polished, calculated words. To them, success wasn't about peace of mind. It was about receiving admiration from others. In the eyes of outsiders, they were a model couple, full of love and warmth, but as someone on the inside, I knew their love was never distributed equally. I have a younger brother named Dylan, 2 years my junior. From an early age, I learned one thing very clearly. In my family, effort didn't always lead to recognition. When I scored a perfect grade on my 8th grade math exam, my mother simply said, "Good, you did what you were supposed to." But when Dylan got a B+ in history, the whole family threw a small celebration, complete with cake and laughter. I stood in the kitchen corner, watching them cheer as if Dylan had just won a full-ride scholarship to Harvard. I never blamed my brother. Dylan never had to try to be loved, he just had to exist, and attention naturally gravitated toward him. I was the opposite. I studied hard, got a part-time job at 16 to buy my own books, and got into college without so much as a single congratulatory word from my parents. When I told them I had been accepted into an architecture program in Chicago, my mother barely nodded. That must not have been easy, but try your best. And yet, when Dylan got into a local community college, they threw a farewell party, hired a live band, and flooded social media with the caption, "So proud of our beloved son." I learned to stand on my own at a young age. I expected nothing from them, and over time, I stopped feeling hurt. I poured myself into work, building my company from a shared rental office to having my own space. Not big, but mine. I met my husband, Matt, on a March afternoon while surveying a model apartment for a new project. He was an electrical engineer, hired to install a smart lighting system. We talked about colors, light, and how a room could influence a person's emotions. A year later, we were married. Then, Ava was born, with a smile just like Matt's, and curious eyes just like mine. The first few years after Ava was born, we weren't financially stable, but we were happy. I continued running my design firm while Matt worked at a construction company. We chose a small apartment near a park where we could hear children laughing through the window in the afternoons. Ava grew up healthy, energetic, always carrying a picture book she loved. There was only one thing I hadn't done yet: get full health insurance for our family. The cost was high, our income was still unstable, and since all three of us were healthy, I kept telling myself we could wait a little longer. I had no idea that hesitation would lead to a moment that would change my life forever. A moment that would force me to stand before my parents in utter desperation, only to hear words that I still remember, word for word. I once thought I had grown numb to being overlooked in my own family, but as it turns out, sometimes parental indifference isn't just about being forgotten at dinner. It can be a cold, sharp blade, cutting deep into the trust you thought had long since faded. I remember the day Dylan got a job at a newly established real estate firm. My mother sent an email to the entire family with the subject line, "Exciting news for our family." They held a celebration at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown where a single appetizer cost as much as half of Ava's monthly preschool tuition. I attended, not because I wanted to congratulate Dylan, but because I didn't want to embarrass my family. I was busy all week, but I still showed up, bringing a small but thoughtful gift, a personalized engraved fountain pen, a fitting gift for someone starting out in business. I handed it to Dylan, and he barely glanced at it before setting it aside, continuing to show off his new smartwatch. "A gift from Mom and Dad, to encourage me?" I said nothing. No one had ever given me anything when I opened my first design office. My parents had only said, "Hope you can figure things out when you fail." No words of encouragement, no phone calls to check in. I gradually realized that, to them, Dylan was an image investment, a charming, well-spoken man who knew how to impress a crowd. And me? I was the quiet woman, the realist, not good at socializing, uninterested in empty conversations. In their eyes, I held no performative value. One time, my mother said it outright after I refused to attend a charity gala she was hosting. "You can't keep avoiding society like this. You're the crack in this family's perfect picture." I remember standing there, staring at the expensive pearl necklace she wore, a piece of jewelry she once told me I wasn't worthy of touching. Every Thanksgiving, our family gathered at my parents' suburban mansion in Boulder. The dinner was meticulously planned, the guest list carefully curated. Lawyers, doctors, people with status. I always felt out of place among the echoes of laughter and shallow praise showered on Dylan. I would talk about my work, the projects I was excited about, the designs I was proud of, but no one listened. But when Dylan talked about a failed lease negotiation, everyone rushed to console him, as if his failure was a precious thing to be nurtured. One time, my mother stood in front of me and Ava, smiling sweetly as she said, "Ava is adorable, but she's a bit emotionally distant, probably because she doesn't spend enough time with her grandparents." I clenched my daughter's hand at that moment, my heart tightening painfully. Ava heard everything, and that night she asked me, "Mommy, did I do something wrong? Is that why Grandma does—" I forced a smile, held her tightly, and thought to myself, if anyone was wrong, it was me, for bringing her into that house full of pretense. I tried to keep my distance, but Matt always encouraged me to give it one more chance, to mend the family bond. He never truly understood how I felt. To him, I was too sensitive, too difficult to connect with, while my parents were just old-fashioned and had high expectations for their children. I didn't blame Matt. He didn't know what it was like growing up in my house. He didn't know the feeling of waiting for a compliment after a perfect test score only to receive a dismissive nod. He had never been endlessly compared to someone else, never seen his mother's disappointed look when he chose design over law or medicine. I always thought I had grown used to it, but I was wrong. Because when Ava collapsed on the floor, her breath weak and her face pale, when I rushed her to the hospital, trembling as the doctor told me she needed emergency surgery, my first thought was my parents. I know it sounds ridiculous. I know they had turned their backs on me so many times. But in that moment, I thought, they're Ava's grandparents. They can't ignore this. Not this time. I didn't know I was about to face one of the cruelest shocks of my life, and this time, it wasn't just me suffering the consequences. It was my little girl, the one I loved more than anything. Ava started coughing in the middle of last autumn, as the cold wind seeped through the cracks of our small apartment. At first, I thought it was just a common cold. She was still playful, still asking for Matt's mac and cheese every night. But then the coughs wouldn't stop. They worsened at night, waking her up, leaving her clutching her chest, gasping for air. We took her to a nearby clinic. The doctor said it was likely mild bronchitis, prescribed medication, and told us to monitor her. But I knew. The worried glance the doctor gave Ava wasn't just casual reassurance. 2 weeks later, Ava started getting exhausted. Each step felt heavier. One afternoon, she was drawing when she suddenly sat down on the rug, whispering, "Mommy, my heart is beating too fast." I held her, feeling her cold skin, my own heart pounding with fear. Matt drove us to the city hospital while I sat in the back seat, holding Ava close, my hands shaking uncontrollably. They ran blood tests, x-rays, and CT scans. We waited in a cold, white room under fluorescent lights that made the air feel heavy with dread. The doctor returned nearly 3 hours later, holding a thick file, his face so serious that I had to grip the armrest to stay steady. "We found an abnormal mass in Ava's left lung," he said carefully, his voice calm but direct. "It's most likely benign, but its location is pressing against her airway. If we don't operate soon, her condition could worsen quickly." A ringing filled my ears. Matt stood frozen beside me, unblinking. I could only manage one question in a voice I barely recognized as my own. Does she need surgery? Right away? The doctor nodded. We recommend proceeding as soon as possible, within the next 3 days, and… He looked at us, hesitating slightly. The cost for the surgery and post-suppressive care is approximately $98,000. I froze. That number hit me like a slap in the face. I knew we didn't have insurance. We had planned to sign up, but every time I saw the monthly premiums, I kept telling myself, just wait a little longer, after the next project is secured. I always thought we had time, but now I realized sometimes a single moment is enough to render all plans meaningless. Matt squeezed my hand. We'll find a way. Please prepare everything for the surgery. The doctor nodded, handed the paperwork to a nurse, and left the room. I looked at Matt. His eyes were trying to stay calm, but I knew he was just as overwhelmed as I was. We had about $15,000 in our savings account. That wasn't enough, not even a fifth of what we needed. I called the bank to request an emergency loan. They denied it because our credit score wasn't high enough. I posted on social media, hoping friends would help spread the word, but time was too short, and the amount was too high. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by Ava's hospital bed, holding her hand, listening to each weak, uneven breath. In the dim glow of the nightlight, her face looked heartbreakingly pale. I pressed a kiss to her forehead and stood up. One thought consumed me. I couldn't let Ava lie here, waiting in vain. I pulled out my phone and dialed the familiar number. My mother's. Why are you calling at this hour, Emily? Her voice was light, but cold. I took a deep breath. Ava is in the hospital. She needs emergency surgery. Mom, I need help. We don't have enough money. Please, just a part of it. I'll pay you back. There was a brief silence on the other end before my mother sighed. Well, this is really bad timing. You know, next week is your father's and my 40th wedding anniversary celebration. Everything has been arranged. So many guests have been invited. It would be so inconvenient to postpone now, Emily. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I'm not asking you to cancel your party, just a little… Ava is your granddaughter. She's in critical condition. Her voice turned stern. Emily, you already know this. We can't tarnish the family's reputation over a personal problem. I'm very sorry, but I can't help you. I couldn't say another word. I hung up. The pain in my chest swelled, not from being rejected, but because the last sliver of hope I had was crushed. I returned to Ava's bedside, wrapped my arms around her small body, and whispered to myself, if my own family could turn their backs on their own granddaughter, then from this moment on, I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, after nearly a sleepless night by Ava's side, I decided to do something I had sworn I would never do again. Return to my parents' mansion. I think I can handle that. I squeezed my hair hard. I knew if I did, they would refuse to see me or come up with an excuse. I put on a dark coat, tied my hair back, and stepped into Matt's old car, gripping Ava's medical records tightly. When I arrived, the driveway was packed with cars. Soft music drifted from the backyard, mixed with laughter and the clinking of glasses. The house was lavishly decorated with white flowers, gold ribbons, and sparkling crystal lights. It took me a few seconds to understand today was the rehearsal party for Dylan's engagement to his fiancée Natalie, the daughter of a wealthy real estate tycoon in the area. I stepped into the grand foyer and immediately felt the weight of stares from the elegantly dressed guests. No one offered me a drink or asked where I had come from. Their gazes brushed past me as if I were a misplaced server who had wandered into the wrong section. I spotted my mother across the room, laughing with a group of older guests, a champagne flute in her hand. I walked straight toward her, stopping right in front of her. Mom, I said, my voice urgent, please, give me 5 minutes. It's important. She looked me up and down, her expression momentarily displeased, as if I had interrupted an important speech. Emily, I'm entertaining guests. Can this wait? I shook my head, my voice trembling but firm. No, it's about Ava. She needs emergency surgery. Mom, I'm begging you. Just help with a portion of the cost. We've already sold everything we can. She hesitated for a brief moment, but then her eyes turned cold. Emily, do you know what today is? This is Dylan's pre-wedding celebration. Everything has been planned for months. Couldn't you have chosen a better time? I swallowed hard, pulled the medical records from my bag and opened them in front of her. Mom, please read this. The doctor said if she doesn't get surgery soon, Ava may not survive. We need $98,000. Mom, she's your granddaughter. The music slowed, and I noticed some people around us had started to listen. A couple standing nearby stepped back. My mother glanced around, then lowered her voice, leaning in. You're embarrassing me, Emily. This is not the place to discuss this. I'm very sorry, but I can't help. The money has already been spent on catering, the wedding dress, the band. Where do you expect me to find nearly $100,000 now? I turned and saw my father. He was standing beside Dylan and a few well-dressed men. As I walked toward them, my father frowned. Emily, what's going on? Did you come here to cause a scene? No, I came to ask for your help, I said directly. Ava needs surgery. I just need a portion of the cost. Please, Dad. She's your granddaughter. Dylan let out a quiet chuckle, his voice light as air but sharp as a blade. Are you serious? Because you didn't plan ahead, now the whole family has to bear the burden? I'm about to get married, and you expect me to cancel everything? Don't be so selfish. I turned to Dylan, locking eyes with him. For the first time in years, I saw the emptiness behind his confident smile. I'm not asking you. I just hope you still have some conscience left. Dylan shook his head and raised his champagne glass. I'm focused on my future. Everyone has their own problems, Emily. Ava is your daughter, not my responsibility. I turned back to my parents, my voice trembling. I'm not asking for anything for myself. I'm asking to save Ava. She is the blood of this family. If family doesn't stand together in hard times, then is it even a family? My father sighed, then turned away, as if I were nothing more than a passing breeze. Emily, don't embarrass us any further. I stood in the middle of the grand ballroom, surrounded by shimmering lights and people who once called me the good daughter, Dylan's sister, Stephen and Claudia's child. But tonight they only looked at me with unease, pity, or worse, indifference. I nodded, tucked the medical records back into my bag, and walked out of that lavish mansion, the place I once called home. Every step on the stone pathway felt like a blow to my chest. When I got into the car and sat down, my tears finally fell, not from pain, but from the stark realization. To them, an extravagant party was more important than a child's life. I was no longer the Emily who kept trying to earn scraps of love from people who didn't know how to give it. From that moment on, I vowed to do whatever it took to save my daughter. Without ever begging them again, I returned to the hospital with a heavy heart and empty hands. Ava was still lying there, her lips dry, her breathing weak, while I felt as if the weight of the world was crushing my chest. Matt held me tightly as I told him everything. Every rejection, every condescending glance, and the moment I walked out of that mansion like a stranger. He didn't say much, just nodded, then whispered in my ear, "We'll save our daughter. We don't need anyone else." The next morning we took action. Matt put his beloved pickup truck up for sale, the truck we had driven across states on our honeymoon. I listed my work computer, printer, even our living room sofa on classified ads. Someone came to check out our furniture and asked, "Moving to a new place?" I just smiled, too exhausted to explain. We managed to gather nearly $29,000 in 3 days. It wasn't a small amount, but we were still far from our goal. I started calling every old friend I could think of. Some didn't answer, some hesitated, but there were also those I would never forget. Anna, my college friend, now a music teacher, sent $500 with a message. I know this isn't much, but it's my entire savings for this month. Ava will make it through. I read her message and tears streamed down my face. Travis, a young employee who had only been at my company for 4 months, walked into my office at noon. He placed an envelope on my desk. I have $320. I was going to buy a new laptop this morning, but I think Ava needs it more. I couldn't say a word. I just hugged him tightly. We received small contributions from friends, neighbors, even people I had only met once in my life. People who weren't bound to me by blood, who owed me nothing, yet still reached out to help. Even so, we were still nearly $40,000 short. I started considering taking out high-interest loans despite knowing the risks. I couldn't sleep, my heart constantly racing as if it were about to burst. And then, one evening, as I sat in Ava's hospital room, Matt's parents, Carol and Henry, came to visit. They lived in a small home in the southern suburbs of Denver, a house they had cherished for nearly 30 years. They weren't wealthy, just hardworking people. I expected nothing more than a hug and words of comfort. But as they entered the room, Henry pulled me aside into the hallway, placing his hand on my shoulder. "Emily," he said, his voice deep and unwavering. "Tomorrow morning, you and Matt need to come to our house. I have something to discuss." I looked at him, confused. What is it? He didn't answer. He just patted my shoulder, then glanced toward Ava's hospital bed, where she lay with a scarf wrapped around her head, an IV still in her tiny hand, and said, "Our granddaughter can't wait any longer." The next morning, Matt and I went to their house. It felt emptier than usual. The living room couch was gone, as were several paintings from the walls. Before I could ask, Carol walked out with a cup of hot tea, placed it on the table, then handed me a stack of papers. I picked them up and skimmed through them. A property transfer contract. The final line burned into my eyes. Sale price, $136,000. I stared at them, stunned. "Mom, Dad, why?" Carol took my hand, smiling gently. "You and Matt need the money to save Ava. This house is just a material thing. We can rent another place. But Ava only has one life. If it were you or Matt in this situation, wouldn't you do the same?" I broke down, not with loud sobs, just silent tears falling onto her hands. The same hands that had once knitted sweaters for Ava's first winter, the hands that had baked holiday treats every year. They weren't my parents by blood, but they chose to stand by me when no one else did. 3 days later, we had the full amount. The hospital scheduled the surgery immediately. The operation lasted 6 hours. 6 hours that felt like 6 years. I sat in the waiting room, clutching Ava's beaded necklace, a birthday gift she had made for me, with the words, "Best mom ever." When the doctor finally walked out, he nodded and gave a small smile. The surgery was a success. Ava will recover. She's incredibly strong. My legs gave out. I collapsed into a chair, covering my face as I sobbed, not from despair but from the overwhelming relief that hope was alive again. Ava had made it through. 3 days later, in a hospital room filled with sunlight, I watched her sleep peacefully, her breathing steady, her small hand unconsciously grasping mine. I knew that from now on, everything would be different. But deep inside me, something still lingered. The memory of that party, the indifferent stares of the people who shared my blood, and I swore, one day, they would understand what it meant to lose something truly important. After Ava's surgery and discharge from the hospital, I thought I would collapse from the exhaustion and financial strain of the past months. But I didn't. A fire that had been smoldering inside me for years had now ignited. I was no longer just working to support my family. I worked to repay kindness. I worked to prove to the world, and especially to those who had turned their backs on me, that I didn't need them to succeed. I started each day at 4:30 a.m. I restructured my entire company, from management systems to marketing strategies. I relearned everything I had once overlooked due to being too busy. Financial management, negotiation skills, digital marketing. By day, I took clients to site visits. By night, I sketched designs, drafted quotes, and sent emails to clients across the state. I even enrolled in a real estate negotiation course on weekends. My small interior design firm, once sharing office space with a nail salon, started landing bigger projects. Cafes, studios, a spa chain in the northern suburbs of Denver. Then a boutique hotel in Aspen. Word spread. A year later, I signed a contract to design interiors for a luxury apartment complex in the new commercial district. The project was worth over $1 million, 10 times any contract I had ever secured. It was the turning point that transformed my company from an obscure name into an industry leader. Modern Spaces magazine wrote an article about me with the headline, "Emily Monroe, from a simple mom to a woman shaping the spaces of thousands." They asked me what had driven me to this success. I looked straight into the camera, unwavering. I once begged my family to help save my daughter's life. They refused. I don't blame them anymore. But in that moment, I learned that I had to be the only pillar my daughter could rely on. And to do that, I had to become stronger than anyone who had ever tried to break me. The interview went viral on social media. Some admired me. Some were moved to tears. And then something I never expected happened. I received an invitation to appear on Voices of Resilience, a well-known talk show that shared stories of ordinary people overcoming adversity. They invited me to New York. During the recording, I told my entire story, from the years of being compared to Dylan to the night I knelt before my parents, begging them to help Ava. The host, a seasoned and sharp-witted woman, looked at me with deep respect. "Emily," she said, "if you could say one thing to the people who abandoned you in your darkest moment, what would it be?" I was silent for a few seconds, then smiled, calm and steady. "Thank you. Because of them, I no longer blindly seek approval from others. And because of them, I found my real family. The people who, despite not sharing my blood, were willing to sell their home to save my child's life." I never mentioned any names during the show, but to those who had witnessed me knocking on that mansion's door that day, who had seen me turned away like a stranger, they knew exactly who I was talking about. After the episode aired, I received hundreds of messages from mothers, fathers, and children who had been abandoned by their own families. They said I had given them hope, that they could rise again, even when pushed to the very bottom. A month later, Fortune Home magazine named my company one of the top 30 most influential interior brands in the Western U.S. My photo appeared on the cover, holding a blueprint, standing in the middle of a construction site, with a massive sign behind me that read, "Monroe Studio, designed to heal." I didn't cry. I didn't feel proud. I only felt at peace. Because I knew that all of this, every step forward, every drop of sweat, came from one thing: my love for Ava. She was my driving force, my reason to keep going, and proof that sometimes pain creates the greatest strength. But I also knew that the people who once turned their backs on me, they were watching. And I had never forgotten my mother's eyes when I begged her to help her granddaughter. I hadn't forgotten my father's nod, as if he were declining an unworthy business deal. They thought I would always be the weak Emily they once knew, but they were wrong. And I was certain they were about to realize that. I never intended to hurt them. When I shared my story on television, I didn't name anyone. I didn't point fingers. I simply told the truth. The raw truth I had carried in my heart for years. But some truths, when spoken in the light, have more power than any accusation. After Voices of Resilience aired, my story spread faster than I expected. Local news outlets began sharing articles, then smaller TV networks invited me for interviews. People connected the dots from the details I had shared. It didn't take long for them to find out that I was the daughter of Stephen and Claudia Monroe, owners of Monroe's Living, and the sister of Dylan Monroe, the real estate broker who once bragged on LinkedIn about his $30,000 engagement ring. I realized the true media storm had begun when an anonymous account reposted a clip from the talk show with the headline, "Parents spend hundreds of thousands on an engagement party, refused to save dying granddaughter, and now their daughter is a millionaire?" The post gained over 500,000 shares in 2 days. Soon after, Monroe's Living began receiving one-star reviews on online platforms. Customers canceled their orders. Some suppliers announced they were cutting ties. The same people who once shook hands with my father and toasted champagne at his parties quietly removed him from their contact lists, because no one wanted to be associated with a family that had turned its back on its own blood to protect their reputation. A week later, I received news that the store had to temporarily close due to financial and legal reasons. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel satisfied. Just an odd emptiness. Like an old chapter being reopened, laid bare under the sun with nothing left to hide. And then there was Dylan. He was once the golden child, the pride of the family, the one who stood in elegant gatherings delivering charming speeches. But now, whenever his name appeared online, people only remembered one thing: the man who laughed in his sister's face when she begged for her daughter's life. Natalie, the fiancée once seen as his perfect match, didn't say a word. She simply erased all their wedding photos, removed her engagement status, and a few days later filed to call off the wedding. I heard from an old acquaintance that Natalie had read the articles, then confronted my parents directly. When they didn't deny anything, she immediately left the apartment she shared with Dylan and moved back in with her mother. Dylan couldn't handle the fallout. His business connections dropped him one by one. He called me one night, his voice hoarse. "Emily, what did you do?" I said nothing. "You went on TV. You made everyone think I'm heartless." I exhaled slowly. "I didn't make anyone think anything, Dylan. I just told the truth. I didn't twist anything. If the truth makes you feel ashamed, then the problem isn't me." He was silent. Then he hung up. I thought that call was the end, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter. From my mother. Pale yellow paper, neat but slightly shaky handwriting, as if her hands were no longer steady. "Emily, we have lost everything. Your father is selling the mansion, Dylan is unemployed, our family name is in ruins. I am not writing to blame you. I am writing because I don't know what else to do. We were wrong, I know that, but please, if you have any mercy left, help us." I read the letter over and over that night. I thought about that mansion, the place where I was turned away in the middle of laughter and expensive wine. I thought about Ava's fragile breaths in that hospital bed. I thought about the aged hands of Matt's parents, the ones who, despite not sharing our blood, had sold their home to save their granddaughter. And I realized, some losses cannot be repaired with money. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't feel joy at their downfall, but I also no longer held resentment. It was simply that now I had a new family. The ones who showed love through actions, not empty prestige. And I had learned the most important lesson of my life. Not everyone you are born to will walk with you until the end. And a part of me knew this wouldn't be the last time they reached out to me. But next time, I would be the one setting the terms. After everything that happened, I understood something more deeply than ever. No one succeeds alone. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how strong I became, Ava was still alive today not just because of my willpower but because of the kindness of those around me. People who didn't share my blood, yet chose to stand by me when the world turned away. I wrote down the names of every person who had helped me in a notebook, not to keep track of debts, but to remind myself never to forget. When my company started making real profits, I didn't think about luxury cars or mansions. I thought about the people who had given their last dollars without expecting anything in return. I invited Anna, the old friend who had sent me $500, to my company's headquarters. She still drove the same old red car with peeling paint, still wore the same knitted coat she had patched up countless times. I handed her a thick envelope, and when she opened it, her eyes widened. "Emily, I know you never asked for anything," I said, smiling, "but I want you to use this to finally start the music school you always dreamed of. You saved my daughter. Now it's my turn to help you rebuild your dream." She hugged me, tears streaming down her cheeks. No more words were needed. Her embrace was enough to say everything. I also visited Travis, the young employee who had once given me his meager savings. By now, he had been promoted to lead designer, and I awarded him a full scholarship to a prestigious design institute in Chicago, the place he had once thought was just an impossible dream. His eyes welled up with tears, but they were filled with determination. I knew, just like me, he would turn his gratitude into something extraordinary. As for my in-laws, Henry and Carol, I owed them a lifetime. I remembered vividly the day they moved out of their old home after selling it to save Ava. They didn't cry, they didn't complain. They simply said, as long as Ava is healthy, anywhere is home. But I never forgot the sight of them holding each other tightly in that tiny rented apartment on the south side of the city, wrapping their old dishes in newspaper. When my company was invited to design interiors for a luxury housing development, I quietly kept track of real estate transactions. After months of negotiations, I bought back their old home, the very house they had once sold to save their granddaughter, from its new owner. I didn't say anything right away. I waited until Carol's birthday. That day, I brought the whole family over and hosted a small celebration. Ava had drawn a giant card with wobbly letters, "I love you, Grandma and Grandpa, because you saved me." After dinner, I handed Carol a small box. She opened it and found an old house key along with a copy of the property deed. Her eyes trembled, her hands shaking. "Emily, what did you do?" she whispered. I simply smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I just wanted you to come back home." Henry stayed silent for a long moment, then gripped my hand tightly, as if trying to say 1,000 words with just that one gesture. A few months later, I made a big decision: to build a new home for our entire family. Not a lavish mansion, but a spacious, warm house with enough room for Ava, Matt, Carol, Henry, and the second child we were expecting. I wanted my children to grow up in a home filled with love, where every meal was accompanied by laughter, not judgmental stares or heavy silence. When Ava heard that her grandparents would be living with us, she jumped up excitedly. "So that means I get to have Grandma's pancakes every morning, right, Mom?" I nodded and hugged her tightly, my heart warming at her innocent words. Our new home sat on the outskirts of the city, overlooking rolling hills that turned white with snow in the winter. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of Ava and Henry chatting in the kitchen, Carol tending to the small garden in the backyard, and Matt flipping through new blueprints in his office. I needed nothing more. I didn't live for revenge, but I lived to remember, and to repay kindness in the fullest way possible. Because I believed that gratitude, given at the right place and the right time, was the most powerful way to heal wounds and open a new chapter. A chapter of true happiness, needing no approval from anyone but my own heart. I had lost one family, but I had found another. And that was the greatest gift life had given me. Life moved forward in a pace I once thought I would never have. Ava was healthy and happy, back in school. Matt managed the company's new branch. Carol and Henry lived with us, bringing a warmth that truly made our house a home. I thought all the old wounds had finally closed. Until one late afternoon at the start of winter, when my phone buzzed on my desk, displaying an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Emily? It's your mother." A trembling voice came through the line. I gripped the phone tightly, memories flooding back in an instant. I hadn't heard her voice in nearly 3 years, since the day I walked away from that mansion with a shattered heart. "I'm calling because we're in trouble," she continued, each word heavy. The bank is about to seize the house. Your father signed a mortgage loan to keep the store running, but we can't pay it back. I didn't respond. I didn't want to bother you. But if you could help, just $200,000 to save the house. After that, we'll manage on our own. I let out a quiet laugh. Not in amusement, not in anger. Just a silent, knowing laugh, as if I had been expecting this call for a long time. Mom, I said calmly, do you remember the last time I begged you for help? When my daughter was in the hospital, needing emergency surgery? The other end of the line fell silent. Then, a long, broken sigh. I remember. I was wrong, Emily. Back then, I didn't think straight. I didn't realize how serious things were. Not serious? I heard my own voice turn ice cold. A child lying on the brink of death? And you call that not serious? I'm sorry, she choked out, her voice breaking into a sob. I know nothing can make up for it, but we're family. Family? I repeated. Family is the one who sells their home to save their grandchild, not the one who raises a glass at a party and turns away when their own blood begs for a life. She was silent. Then she whispered, So, you won't help? I sighed. I will help, but on one condition. You and Dad must come to my company and receive the money in person. Yes, she responded quickly, as if clinging to a final lifeline. 2 days later, at the agreed time, they arrived. The conference room on the third floor of my company was bright with winter sunlight. On the table sat a sleek black suitcase. Inside was exactly $200,000, neatly stacked in bundles. When they entered, I no longer saw the commanding presence they once carried. My father looked frail, his hair streaked with gray, deep hollows under his eyes. My mother wore an old coat, no longer the elegant woman who once scoffed at my dress for being too plain. They sat across from me, hesitant, unable to find the words. I opened the suitcase and turned it toward them. This is the money you need, I said, not raising my voice but making sure every word was clear. Not because I still have feelings for you, but because I don't want anyone to sleep on the streets, not even the ones who abandoned me. My mother reached out for the suitcase, but I stopped her. Wait, I said, my eyes cold. Before you take this money, I want to say one thing. They both looked up at me. From the moment you walk out of this room, I will no longer consider you my parents. No contact, no visits, no requests. This is the last time I will help. My mother burst into tears. Emily, you can't. I can, I cut her off. And I have to, because I need to protect the people who are truly my family. Matt, Ava, Carol, and Henry. They sacrificed everything for me. And you? What did you do when your granddaughter was dying? No one answered. Just muffled sobs and downcast eyes. I stood up and signaled to my assistant. Please escort our guests out. My father clutched the suitcase as if holding on to the last remnants of his pride. They walked past me without a single word of farewell. As the door shut behind them, I looked down at my hands. Not trembling, not unsteady, just calm, as if the final chapter had been turned. That night, when I told Matt and Carol what had happened, no one criticized me. Matt simply held my hand tightly. You did the right thing. You are stronger than anyone. I nodded. But I knew, deep down, this wasn't a victory. This was just an ending of a bond that had fractured too many times to ever be repaired. I had given, but I had also chosen to keep what was most precious to me, my peace. And sometimes, that's all we need to move forward. After that final meeting at my company, I never heard from my parents again. No calls, no letters, no signs that they wanted to reach out. And strangely, I didn't feel empty or regretful. Maybe because I had truly let go. I once thought that when the time came to say a final goodbye to them, I would feel guilt. But in reality, the only thing I felt was relief. Relief that I no longer had to exhaust myself proving my worth to people who had never truly loved me. Relief that I had made my choice. I chose the people who had reached out to save my child, not the ones who turned away to save face. I didn't hold resentment, but I didn't forgive either. Forgiveness to me isn't forgetting. It's refusing to let the past dictate my present. And my present now is a home, filled with laughter, a stable career, and a life that isn't lavish, but is rich with gratitude. Sometimes, I wonder if there will come a day when they call again. Maybe when they're sick. Maybe when Dylan faces a crisis. Maybe when everything falls apart beyond repair. And when that day comes, what will I do? I don't have a clear answer. I am human. My heart still holds contradictions that logic cannot fully untangle. I once stood before my father, seeing that he had aged 10 years in just one, and part of me still felt pain. But I also remember how he turned his back when I begged to save Ava. I remember how my mother held her wine glass instead of my hand. I remember it all. And perhaps because I remember so vividly, I haven't slammed the door shut completely. But that door now rests in my hands, not as an open wound, but as the greatest lesson of my life. I share this story not to attack anyone, not to dwell on the past, or to seek sympathy. I share it because I know there are many people out there like me. People who have been shattered by their own families. People who believed they had to endure, to sacrifice, just because of the words blood ties. But the truth is, not everyone who shares your blood is your family. And sometimes, choosing to walk away isn't cruelty, it's learning to save yourself. If you are standing at the crossroads of duty and pain, I want to tell you this: you are not alone. And you have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to love without being used. You have the right to protect yourself and those who deserve it, even if it means walking away from relationships that once felt impossible to leave. Today, every morning, I wake up in a home filled with warmth and joy. Ava is always the first to run into my room, hugging me tight and whispering, "Last night, I dreamed you were a superhero, Mom." That simple sentence is enough to assure me that every painful decision I made was the right one. Matt often tells me I'm the strongest person he's ever met. I'm not sure if I'm strong, but I know I am someone who has learned how to stand up. Not just for myself, but for the family I rebuilt from nothing, but my 2 hands, and a heart that never stopped hoping. If you've read this far, I want to ask you something. If one day the people who hurt you come back, asking for help, what would you do? Would you help them to prove you've risen above it all? Or would you hold on to your peace, refusing to be dragged back into the pain? Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment below. I want to hear your story, truly. Because maybe, somewhere in the puzzle pieces of life, we are all just trying to learn how to forgive, or, at the very least, how to let go with grace. And if you've been through something like I have, never forget. You deserve happiness, peace, and a family. Whether by blood or by choice, that puts you first. Thank you for listening to my story. This was my journey, and now, how will you write yours? What do you think of Emily's decision? If it were you, what would you do in that situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow this channel for more powerful stories about life and family. My name is Savannah. I'm 26, and I grew up in the suburbs outside Sacramento. That day, I never imagined I'd lose my entire family in a single evening. It all started with a simple message. Come home tonight, 6 o'clock. We need to talk. Dad didn't offer any explanation. I assumed it was just another family dinner, maybe about Brielle's upcoming wedding or Landon's new job at the real estate firm. When I stepped into the house, there was no smell of Mom's cooking, no music playing from the Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen corner. Just silence. A strange, heavy kind of silence. Dad, Mom, Landon, and Brielle were already seated in the living room. No one greeted me. No smiles. It felt like I had walked into a courtroom, with the verdict already decided. "You're late," Dad said, his eyes fixed on the sofa armrest. Traffic was heavy. I gave a small smile, trying to stay calm. No one replied. Mom looked down at her folded hands. Brielle turned her face away, avoiding my eyes. Only Landon looked straight at me, a hint of satisfaction in his stare, like he had rehearsed this confrontation. "Sit down," Dad said. "We need to talk." I sat in the single chair by the window, the last light of the day casting their faces into shadow. No one spoke right away. Then Landon broke the silence, as if he couldn't wait a second longer. "She's been taking money from Mom and Dad's retirement account. We have the statement." He placed the printed sheet on the table, the red marked transaction circled in the center. "What is this?" And, Brielle cut in, her voice sharp as steel, "You slept with my fiancé. He admitted everything. So don't even try to lie." I was stunned. I looked at each of them, waiting for someone to speak up, to say it was just a bad joke. But no one did. Not a single word in my defense. Not one question for me. Mom shook her head gently. "You're not the daughter we used to know." I tried to keep my voice steady. "How can you believe this? No one even asked me anything." "We've discussed enough," Dad said, cutting me off. "As a family, we've made a decision. You're no longer part of the trust, and it's best if you leave tonight." I thought I misheard. "Tonight?" Landon exhaled like he'd just been unburdened. "You have 1 hour. Your stuff's already packed. It's in the hallway." I got up, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Each step past them felt like walking on glass. Mom didn't look at me. Brielle crossed her arms, triumphant. Landon leaned back, satisfied. Like he had just closed a high-stakes deal. I walked through the garage. Dad was tossing something into the trash bin. I looked closer. It was the old photo album, the only original copy, the one with pictures of me and Grandma, graduation day, me beaming with our first kitten. "What are you doing?" My voice was dry. "You won't need this where you're going." Tears didn't come, not because I was strong, but because the pain hadn't yet found a way out. I got into the car and drove, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I couldn't go back. Night fell quickly. I found a rundown motel off 3rd Street with a blinking vacancy sign barely hanging on. The dim room light cast a yellow haze over the faded walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, arms around my stomach. A sudden, violent wave of nausea hit. I reached into my purse, dug through the bottom for the pregnancy test. The bathroom smelled of bleach. I stared at the 2 red lines on the test strip, my palms icy cold. Not 1, but 2. The doctor had once mentioned the possibility of twins. I never imagined. Not now. Camden is their father. A good man. One my family never respected simply because he didn't come from wealth or wear a fancy title. I hadn't even had the chance to tell him before everything fell apart. Now I was sitting in a dingy motel room. No money, no home, no one on my side. No backup plan, no easy path. I placed my hand on my belly, where 2 small lives were slowly growing. I had lost everything, but what my parents didn't know was that I was carrying something they would never again be able to control. I don't remember how long I stayed in that dark room. The bathroom light still glowed faintly yellow, reflecting my pale, hollow face in the cloudy mirror. The pregnancy test sat next to the sink, a cold, unblinking confirmation. I was pregnant. Not with 1, but 2 souls. Everything still felt like a whirlwind. I had no idea how I would survive, but one thing was clear. I hadn't done the things they accused me of. I remember the look on Landon's face when he slid the bank statement across the table. The line said, "Transfer retirement account," circled in bold red ink. I didn't even know Mom had a separate account, let alone her login credentials. I'd never touched a cent. But because it showed S. Bennett, I was immediately the thief. Landon knew I used the name Savannah Grace on every document. He had helped me print my enrollment forms for freshman year. He knew, and still he chose to accuse me. And Brielle, she stared right at me and threw out her lie like a blade. You tried to seduce my fiancé. He told me everything. I barely knew Brett. We spoke for maybe 5 minutes at a single engagement party. But Brielle didn't need evidence. She just needed a lie, told at the right moment. As for my parents, they didn't ask a single question. My silence was their proof. They believed Landon and Brielle so absolutely, there was no room left for truth. When I stepped into the garage, I saw Dad throw the album, the one Mom had spent years compiling from printed photos, into the trash. I used to cuddle it to sleep when I was a kid. Now it sat between a crumpled soda can and a greasy paper towel, like a memory they were proud to erase. I didn't retrieve it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew, even if I held on to those pictures, their memory of me was already rewritten. Forever. I couldn't sleep that night. Sitting on a sunken mattress with my back against the wall, I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages. And I started piecing the details together. A week before I was thrown out, I had used Mom's computer to submit a scholarship application. She told me to use it freely, then left for the grocery store. During that time, I logged into my own bank account to pay the processing fee using my credit card. I logged out afterward, but I forgot one thing. Landon was the one who had reset the password manager on that computer. He could access any account I had logged into. And with Brielle? I remember during that party, Brett had asked if I was interested in interning at his law firm. I politely declined and stepped away, but I forgot the way Brielle looked at us. Not curious, but furious. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. To them, all I had to do was stay silent at the wrong moment, and everything would be twisted into the worst version possible. The room was pitch black. Outside the window, the streetlight flickered like it was tired. I wrapped my arms around my belly and whispered softly, "We don't have anything, but Mommy won't let anyone touch this truth. No home, no property, no family. Just me, and 2 lives that haven't yet taken their first breath." I pulled out my last debit card. My balance was under $130. I had nowhere to go, no one to call, but I still had these hands, and a memory that never betrayed me. I opened a new note on my phone and started listing. The day I used Mom's computer, name of the scholarship file, the transaction ID Landon brought up, revealed this accusation, the call from Brett 2 days later, the one I never answered. The night in Phoenix was colder than I expected. Inside room 204 of a rundown motel nearly 5 miles from downtown, the heater buzzed steadily like a breath too shallow. I sat curled up on the bed, wrapped in the silence of a place that wasn't home. I needed something to keep myself alert, to avoid sinking deeper into fear. I reached into the canvas bag I had brought from home, the one that held a few clothes, an old lipstick, and something familiar I had almost forgotten. A dark brown leather notebook. I used to call it my survival log back in college, where I wrote every idea, every half-finished research plan, and conversations I never had the courage to say aloud. I opened it. The first page bore my own sharp, small handwriting. No one has the right to erase what you've thought. I flipped a few pages and stopped at Lipid Conversion Enzyme Project with a note underneath, unpresented, unpublished, not in thesis. This was the project I had poured myself into during the summer of junior year. Then, during a group presentation at school, Landon, who had accidentally seen the draft on my hard drive, stood before the entire committee and presented it as his own, without a single mention of my name. I still remember how it felt, like all the blood in my body had drained in one heartbeat. After that presentation, Mom hugged Landon, praising him, finally showing real academic initiative. I stood next to them, gripping my folder so hard the edges cut into my palm. I flipped to another page. A note from Thanksgiving 2018. The last one, Grandma was healthy enough to join us for dinner. That day, I wore her old bracelet, the one with the tiny teardrop-shaped blue stone. Brielle saw it and announced loudly, "That should have been mine. She only gave it to you because she pitied you for not being pretty enough for pageants." I pretended not to hear, but inside, I remembered every word. No one knew that a week before Grandma passed, she called me into her room and pressed something into my hand. A white gold wedding ring with a slightly scratched sapphire. "This," she said, "is for someone who protects what matters, not someone who performs." I had hidden it inside the hollowed-out spine of Jane Eyre, the book no one in the house had the patience to read past chapter 3. Yet at the funeral, Brielle showed up wearing that very ring, claiming, "Grandma promised this to the first daughter who got married." No one objected. No one questioned it. Just like when I was cast as the one who hurt the family. No one listened. I just stepped back, 1 inch, then another, until I no longer recognized myself in their eyes. I closed the journal and placed it on my lap. My hand settled over my belly, where 2 small lives were growing inside me. They wouldn't remember any of this, but I would never forget. I looked out the window. The streetlight reflected half my face in the glass, more determined than I'd realized. No longer the shy senior, no longer the family's odd one. It was a mother preparing for the biggest battle of her life. A life without family insurance, without retirement accounts, without any fake shields. I turned on the desk lamp and opened my laptop. My mind was heavy, but my fingers typed into the search bar. Grants for early-stage biotech founders, Arizona. Low-cost prenatal care clinics, Phoenix. Nonprofit incubator space for women-led startups. I didn't know exactly where I'd begin, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't start in silence. Outside, the wind stirred through dry palm trees. I leaned into the chair and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day, and this time, I was the one writing it. I was sitting in the city library, my hands still faintly smelling of old paper and cheap ink, when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "If it's true, you're not alone." I reread that sentence at least 3 times. No name, no punctuation, just the familiar rhythm of a text I'd once memorized. Camden. I had never told him I was pregnant. I hadn't even told him about being kicked out. The last time we spoke, I canceled a coffee date saying something came up with family. He simply replied, "I understand. Whenever you're ready, I'm still here." I never texted back. But a few hours later, as I sat slumped by the motel window, there was a knock. Gentle. 2 knocks. A pause. Then 2 again. The pattern only he used. I stepped out and opened the door. Camden stood there, sleeves rolled, hair tousled, gaze calm. Just like the first time he sat beside me in molecular research class. No questions. No blame. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, careful, like he feared I might vanish if he spoke too loud. I didn't answer. I just stepped back and let him in. We didn't talk much. I handed him a glass of water and placed the pregnancy test on the table without explanation. Camden looked down, then back at me, his expression steady. "You don't have to explain," he said. I nodded slightly. I wasn't planning to keep it a secret. Everything just happened too fast. He smiled, like he understood without needing to hear more. "Your family? I know part of what happened," he said. Turned sharply. "Who told you?" "My mom. She's old friends with your Aunt Regan. They still talk." He paused. "She told me what she heard. But I don't care what they said. I want to hear it from you. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't steal. I didn't seduce anyone. They just needed a reason to push me out. He sat beside me, said nothing more, but his hand rested lightly on mine, like he was giving me a piece of strength I hadn't realized I'd lost. Camden didn't return home after that night. He sent his mother a message. I'm okay, but I won't become what you expected me to be. Then he rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in South Tempe, where the morning light came in strangely beautiful. We stayed there for a while. He worked part-time at a data center to cover our living expenses. I spent most of my time at the city library, rewriting the entire research project Landon once stole from me, shaping it into a new version. The core idea was still lipid conversion enzymes, but I added applications for pregnant women and patients with malnutrition. A fresh innovation. A direction entirely my own. I named the project Solinova Bio, short for soul, line, and nova. Soul, bloodline, and a new beginning. Camden didn't interfere. He quietly printed documents, brought coffee exactly how I liked it, and stuck post-it notes all over the wall. No one understands this idea better than you. No one's name needs to be ahead of yours on the author list. We're not getting revenge, we're rebuilding. I applied to 3 startup programs for young female founders. One responded. A 6-week program focused on public health and biotech innovation. I was selected for the pitch round. On the day I was scheduled to present, I wore a simple navy dress. My belly was starting to show. The organizers gently offered to reschedule due to health concerns, but I refused. I'm not presenting despite being pregnant, I said. I'm presenting while pregnant. Because that's part of why I'm doing this. Camden waited outside the auditorium. He didn't interfere. He just stood there, eyes steady as I walked on stage. Under soft lighting and a flickering projector, I began with one sentence. They once told me I didn't deserve this idea. So today, I'll show them. I don't need anyone's permission to move forward. My first pitch happened in a space so upscale it felt foreign. The main hall of the Scottsdale Startup Hub was covered in marble, overhead lights beaming down on clusters of young founders with glowing laptop screens and shiny leather shoes. I walked in more than 4 months pregnant, wearing a charcoal maxi dress and a blazer Camden had ironed the night before. Some glances passed over me, brief, dismissive. Not everyone smiled, but everyone looked, and not all of them hid the judgment in their eyes. When it was my turn, the coordinator handed me the mic, and I took a deep breath. The first slide appeared. Solinova Bio, Advancing Hormonal Health for Women Overlooked by Public Health Care. I presented clearly and concisely. What I said wasn't a dream, it was data. Enzyme code optimization, and a strategic approach to reaching clinics in under-resourced counties. Every word had been written, reviewed, and rewritten over dozens of sleepless nights. When I finished, the room was quiet for a few seconds before a man in the front row spoke. He had silver hair, a diagonal striped tie, and a name tag that read, Greg Martin, Senior Venture Advisor. Yes, Savannah, he said with a faint smirk and a tilted head. I won't deny your passion, but let me be honest. We've invested in enough single mothers trying to prove something. They all drop out before the first financial round. I felt my heart beat slow in my chest. No one spoke up. No one asked why my numbers were so solid. They only saw the bump, and what they believed to be a liability. I left the auditorium with a dry throat and legs heavy as stone. Outside, the sun was shining but gave no warmth. Camden stood by the car, and when he saw me, he gave a quiet nod. He didn't ask. He just opened the car door, like silence itself could be a refuge. We drove home in silence. I didn't say anything until we got back to the apartment. I took off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch. They didn't see me, I said. They only saw a burden. Camden sat beside me. No hugs, no comfort, just one sentence. Then let them look. We'll keep building. The next morning, I opened my contact list. Familiar names appeared. Mom, Dad, Landon, Brielle, home. One by one, I tapped delete. I didn't need any of them to exist. I went for a prenatal checkup at a small clinic in a Mexican-American neighborhood. No one there knew who I was. I filled out the birth registration form with a new name. Alina Mason. Not Savannah Bennett, the name my family had branded with shame. Elena was the name I chose. Mason was the last name of the only person who had stayed beside me when everyone else walked away. The nurse didn't ask many questions. She simply held my hand while checking my blood pressure and smiled when she heard the heartbeat. Twins, she said. 2 strong, clear heartbeats. That evening, I reopened my project file. I deleted the old introduction, the part that talked about origins and family influence. I rewrote it. Solanova wasn't created to impress. It was created to fill a gap, the kind people like me have been left behind in. Behind this product is not a prestigious pedigree, but a woman carrying 2 lives in her belly, writing code in a 2-bedroom apartment, asking no one for permission to begin. I saved it, didn't send it anywhere, but I knew I'd just done what needed to be done. Near midnight, I received an email. The subject line read simply, "Initial funding approved." At first, I thought I had misread it, but when I clicked in, a short, concise message appeared, and one line made my heart skip. Selenova bio is bold and deeply insightful. I reviewed your pitch deck. Most people miss what truly matters, but I didn't. Funding, $25,000, no strings, just keep your voice steady. Signed, R. Ainsley, Southwest Biotech Innovation Fund. I'd never heard of him, but I knew the fund. They rarely backed solo founders, especially those without a commercialized product. I reread the email 3 times. My hand instinctively rested on my belly, where the baby stirred gently as if in agreement. The next morning, Camden printed that email and taped it to the fridge. "It's not about the money," he said. "It's because someone saw you, without needing anyone else to vouch for you." The following week, I received an invitation to a public health conference held in downtown Phoenix. It was just a small discussion panel for female founders. I almost declined the schedule clash with one of my prenatal appointments, but in the end, I accepted. Partly to thank those supporting me, partly because I needed to show that Solanova was no longer just a draft. Camden drove me to the hotel hosting the event. As soon as I stepped into the main lobby, a massive banner caught my eye. A face I recognized instantly with a chill. Brielle. Her face was front and center on the main sponsor banner with a shimmering slogan beneath it. For a healthcare future led by women, an initiative by the Brielle Bennett Foundation. And just below that, a quote. "We need solutions that start from within, where hormones and cells shape behavior." I froze. That was the opening line from my senior thesis, the foundation of my idea about enzyme regulation based on women's hormonal cycles. No citation, no name. Just Brielle's confident gaze staring into the camera, as if she had conceived it all herself. I entered the conference hall with a coldness in my chest, not from shock, but from a familiar disgust. The shamelessness that had become their signature ever since they cast me out like a label that no longer fit. I sat in the front row. When the moderator called my name, I stood, hands slightly shaking but steps firm. The first slide appeared, the Solanova bio logo. I didn't start with a standard introduction. I looked directly at the audience and said, "Some of you may have read the phrase, 'medical solutions must start at the hormonal level.' That wasn't a slogan, that was the first sentence of my thesis, written in 2018 in a tiny dorm room. And it didn't come from any prestigious family foundation." The room fell silent. I continued. "I don't come from a legacy. I wasn't polished by media. I'm just a 26-year-old woman pregnant with twins who chose to stay in science. No matter how many people told me I should walk away." A brief pause. Then I turned to the moderator. And for the record, I don't have a sister. This time, murmurs rose. A few people glanced at the banner behind me. I didn't need to say a name. They connected the dots themselves. That night, a short clip of my speech circulated in a professional forum. People didn't focus on my pregnancy. They talked about that one line. I don't have a sister. It became a quiet battle cry. A way of drawing a line in the sand against impersonators, usurpers, and those who had used power to silence authentic voices. Camden drove me home. Along the way, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from journalists, startup mentors, even young scientists offering support. I didn't reply right away. I just leaned back against the seat, the nightlights reflecting off the glass, casting light on a version of me that felt different. No longer the discarded daughter, but a real founder, rewriting what it meant to be valuable. 3 days after the conference, I received a cream-colored envelope, delivered by express mail right to my door. In the top left corner was a bold print, McAllister and Reed Law Offices. I knew exactly what was waiting inside. Camden stood beside me as I opened it. Inside was a 2-page legal notice, written in polite but firm legalese, solid as cement. Our client, Miss Betrayal Bennett, hereby demands that Miss Savannah Bennett remove all defamatory public statements, including but not limited to those made at the Phoenix Public Health Conference on March 12th. Additionally, we require a public apology and a written commitment not to repeat any defamatory conduct. Failure to comply will result in legal action for reputational damage and personal brand infringement. I smirked. Brielle had spent her life in places where lies were dressed up as truth, where status was built on media connections and curated photos. She thought I was still the silent girl from that engagement party years ago. But this time, I wasn't standing alone. I stepped into my small office, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick folder I had been quietly building for more than 6 months. Original research documents on enzyme studies, drafts with time-stamped metadata, presentation files submitted to my thesis advisor. All backed up, physically and digitally, with third-party time verification. On a separate USB drive, I had an audio clip, a conversation accidentally recorded at a backyard party last year, where Brielle, while mocking my paper, said aloud to a group of friends, "She only knows how to write dry enzyme code. I just took that part, added some emotional language, and boom, inspiring speech." And another recording. My mother's voice, cold and cutting. "Savannah always makes things complicated. She doesn't know when to shut up. Brielle makes everything smoother. If she got pushed out, it's because she couldn't be controlled." I sent the entire package to my attorney, Renee Whitmore, a Detroit-born powerhouse who had sued 3 major healthcare companies for copyright violations. Her voice over the phone gave me confidence from the very first sentence. "We don't need to threaten. We just need to show them we've been ready for a long time." The trial was held on a soft sunny morning in early April. I wore the charcoal gray blazer, the one my mother once said made me look rigid, like a woman destined to stay single forever. I walked into the courtroom with Renee by my side. Camden sat in the back row, no tie, but his eyes followed my every step. Across the aisle, Brielle arrived 5 minutes late, wearing a cream-colored dress and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. Calculated exhaustion. Flanking her were 2 sharply dressed young attorneys. The judge was Dorothy Leland, likely in her early 50s, sharp-eyed and clearly intolerant of long-winded arguments. Renee began by submitting a thick, time-stamped file and a USB drive containing audio recordings. "Your Honor, my client is the original creator of the Solanova technology platform, which was intellectually stolen by Ms. Bennett, who then used it to build her personal brand, secure federal grant funding, and establish a family-branded organization. We have clear evidence for each of these claims." The judge didn't ask further questions. She simply nodded and instructed the defense to respond. Brielle's lawyers spoke, attempting to paint a picture of family misunderstandings, miscommunication, and minor document similarities. But when the recordings were played, the courtroom fell into utter silence. No one mistook Brielle's voice. No one misread her intent. After reviewing all the evidence, Judge Leland issued a temporary ruling. This court hereby orders the suspension of any use of content, imagery, quotations, or materials related to the original enzyme research belonging to the plaintiff, Savannah Bennett, or the Solanova Bio brand, by the defendant, Betrayal Bennett. This injunction will remain in effect until a final judgment is rendered. No applause, no cheers, but that silence, in a room once filled with noise and denial, was the clearest victory of all. I stepped out of the courthouse into the morning light, feeling like a part of the tumor buried in my memory had been cut away. No gloating, no satisfaction, just one thing. Justice was no longer a luxury. I filed the official paperwork for Solanova Bio on a morning in early May. Every line, the mission statement, product categories, technical specs, had been written by me. When the system sent back a confirmation email reading, "Entity registered, active," I simply stared at the screen. No fireworks, no champagne toast, just a quiet milestone. Something burning slow in my chest, part comfort, part warning. Now the real beginning. I chose to continue researching women's hormonal health during pregnancy and perimenopause, especially for those left behind by the healthcare system. Immigrants, women of color, single mothers. This project wasn't about revenge. It was something the younger version of me had once wished for. A world where women didn't have to beg to be diagnosed correctly, to be heard, to be valued. Camden helped me find a small office in a co-working space in Tempe. Gray walls, scuffed wood floors, an old printer, but it was quiet, full of light. And it was mine. In the first week after launching the company, I received a handwritten letter, not an email, tucked in a yellow envelope with no return address, sent directly to my new office without going through any public registration channel. Inside was a single sticky note with block letters written in thick black marker. "Trash like you doesn't deserve to be a mother. Biotech isn't for people like you." Along with it was a photo of the white car I drive, taken at night from a close distance. I stared at the picture, then looked up. Camden was sitting in the corner of the room, reviewing the contract for the spectrometer purchase. "I'm okay," I said as I handed it to him. He read it, expression unchanged. "I'll install cameras, and I'll pick you up every evening until we move into the new place." The next night, my car was spray-painted in red letters on the hood, "Fake Mother." I didn't wipe it off. I didn't call the police. I drove it as is to work, parked it right in front of the building, stepped out with my pregnant belly showing under a plain cotton shirt, hair tied back, laptop in hand. Everyone saw. And I let them see. That same day, I signed the contract with the first community clinic to pilot Solanova Bio's early hormone testing kit. A week later, I received an email from my father. No subject line. Just one sentence inside. "Betrayal is gone. It's just your mother and me now." No apology, no check-in, just a stark, stripped-down truth, packaged as if it might soften me. I didn't reply. I closed the email, turned off phone notifications, and returned to my desk. I was in the middle of editing a slide, analyzing hormone cycle response in women who had undergone late-stage ovarian cancer treatment. My mother, she had battled that disease. They caught it too late. When she started experiencing abnormal bleeding, the doctor said it was just age. When her belly began to swell, they said it was bloating. By the time I insisted she get imaging done, the tumor had already invaded the peritoneum. I remember the day she sat in the waiting room, lips pale, hands trembling, asking me, "Do you think there's a way people like me could find out sooner?" I had no answer then, because I had nothing. Now I do. Solanova Bio isn't to memorialize her. It's to continue what she never got the chance to do. Get diagnosed early, live longer, meet her grandchildren. I don't go back to the old house. I don't drive by it. I don't check Landon or my parents' social media anymore. But every morning when I walk into the office, I look at the whiteboard with the first line I ever wrote in black marker. They tried to write me out of the story, now I'm rewriting it. With science. I'm not waiting for anyone to say my name. And I've long stopped expecting a way back into places that never made space for me. Spring comes late in Arizona, but brings an oddly gentle warmth. Sunlight spills evenly across the white picket fence that surrounds the small home nestled in a quiet Chandler suburb. The backyard is just wide enough to grow 2 rows of fruit trees, one orange, one apple. But to us, it's an entire world. Leo and Leora, my twin children with Camden, just turned 3. They dart around chasing a butterfly fluttering above the garden beds. Leora giggles, holding up a plastic shovel still clumped with dirt. Leo, more reserved, watches his sister with quiet delight. Camden is seated under the pergola, adjusting the swing chain he built himself the first week we moved in. I stand not far away, a cup of herbal tea in hand, warmth from the morning still lingering from the lab. Behind me, in the cozy kitchen with oak shelves and hand-drawn pictures on the walls, a small box sits quietly on the table. It came from an unfamiliar address. No sender. Only my name written in careful cursive. I hesitated a few times before opening it. Inside was a photograph. I nearly held my breath as I saw it. An old print, yellowed with age, but clear and intact. In it was me, 11 years old, wearing a blue dress my grandmother had sewn, standing beside her in the old backyard. Her arm wrapped around my shoulder, and I was smiling awkwardly. The kind of smile a child makes before they learn how to pretend confidence. I recognized the photo. It had once been part of our family album. The only difference? I had never seen the full version. In the framed prints that used to hang in the old house, the part where I stood had been cut out. Only my grandmother's shoulder remained, the hem of my dress hidden by the frame. On the back of the photo, written in purple ink, was a handwritten line. This is the version that matters. I don't know who sent it. Maybe a quiet relative still watching, or maybe, somehow, my grandmother had kept it for the right moment. I didn't cry. I just smiled. For the first time in years, I saw myself in a family photo, where I hadn't been erased. That night, after the kids fell asleep in their room, I sat beneath the pergola. The sky shifted to soft indigo and the string lights hanging overhead glowed a warm gold. Camden brought out 2 glasses of lemonade, setting one down in front of me. "Are you planning to visit the research center tomorrow?" he asked, voice light as the breeze. I nodded. They're starting clinical trials in Tucson. I want to be there personally to monitor the process. Camden didn't ask any further questions. He knew what I needed and why I chose to go. I leaned back in my chair, eyes tracing the night sky scattered with faint stars. The old photo had been placed in a frame and now sat on my desk, right beside the atomic model I used to teach new students. I no longer dream of conversations that never happened. I no longer wait for apology emails, late-night phone calls, or invitations to Sunday dinners. I never asked to be on their list. They tried to erase me. But I built something they can't ignore. I've built something they can never deny. Leo and Leora will grow up in a home where truth is heard, where ideas are protected, where kindness doesn't come with conditions. They'll know that their mother was once thrown out of a place that used to be called family. But that didn't stop her from building a new one, a new future, with the same hands that once had nothing. The night breeze rustled through young branches, carrying the soft scent of damp earth and sun-dried orange peels. I closed my eyes, not to forget, but to remember. Completely. Savannah's story is a powerful reminder that real worth doesn't come from bloodlines or others' approval. It comes from having the courage to stand firm, to hold on to what's right in silence and action. In the face of rejection, she didn't beg to be remembered. She chose to build a life no one could erase. In the real world, anyone can be written out of someone else's story. But what truly matters is whether we dare to write a new chapter with our own hands. What do you think about Savannah's journey? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow this channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories about family and resilience.